10. We end with verse 12. That's what I had 12 stuck in my head. Mark chapter 10. And at a first glance, you might not see, or you might wonder how this connects to America. But there is actually a very clear connection between what is going on in our country today and Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 12. So we'll be reading that, but before we read that, I want to read something else as an introduction. So Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 12, and we're not going to read that yet. We are going to start with something I'm going to read to you. So this is a quote from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. What that means is the people who started our country, they believed that some things were so obvious they didn't even need to be defended or proven. They're just very obvious to anyone who just thinks about it with an open mind. It would be obvious. Not everything is like that, but some things are, right? Some things are self-evident. They believed that these truths they're writing down were self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So they said it's self-evident that all men are created equal. You know, it is self-evident that all men are created. Nature is actually proof that there's a God. The Bible says they're without excuse. So truthfully, everyone actually knows in their heart there's a God because they know that something cannot come from nothing. That is actually self-evident. But also that they're created equal. Because human beings can intermarry with each other. Any human being from any part of the world, of any skin color, anything, can intermarry with each other, can produce children. Even the slave owners who said that white people are superior to black people had children by their own slaves, refuting their own statements. They knew it wasn't true. Because if they were an inferior race, and there's no such thing as race in the Bible, but if they were an inferior race, they wouldn't be able to produce children by them, right? Because two different species cannot produce children. So they knew, everyone does know, it's self-evident that all men are created and that all men are created equal. America was founded on these ideas. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Not endowed by the universe. Not endowed by evolution. Endowed by their Creator. They said this was self-evident. Many people say, oh, that's a Bible idea. Creation is a biblical idea. No, they said it was self-evident. They didn't say it was in the Bible. Some other people, in fact, the person that wrote that, Thomas Jefferson wrote this, it was in agreement with the committee, but he was actually assigned to write it. He actually did not believe the whole Bible was true. I have the complete works of John Wilson. I have the complete works of Thomas Jefferson on my shelf. And he questioned whether the whole Bible was true. He struggled to believe the miracles. He struggled to believe in the resurrection. He was what's called an Enlightenment thinker, okay? But he did believe that creation, that's self-evident. He did believe that. That's America was founded on that idea. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. In other words, if God created everyone and everyone's equal, this is all self-evident, then their Creator has also given them unalienable rights, and that would be your conscience, right? We know what our conscience knows right and wrong. The Bible says we have the law written in our hearts. It's not about the Bible. It's about what is self-evident. America was built on truths that are self-evident. Yes, there are biblical ideas that are in our Constitution and in our founding, but the ideas that built our country are actually self-evident truths. All right. Now they're also taught in the Bible, but they're self-evident. You can come to those conclusions without having a Bible. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And what will those rights be? Well, they say that among these, they're not saying these are all the rights, but they're saying among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is, I looked this up when I was working on this message, and they put the word creator in capitals in the Declaration of Independence. You know, the original copy is handwritten. And creator is capital, but interestingly, the word rights is written in capital letters. The first letter is capitalized. And it says that among these are life, and life is capitalized. The word L, the letter L. Liberty is capitalized, and the pursuit of happiness, and happiness is capitalized. They were emphasizing those words. They're endowed by their creator, with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, I want you to think about this. How would God giving you a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, how would that be self-evident? Well, every human being wants that. Every human being wants that. You want the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of your own happiness. Because I don't get to tell you what makes you happy. You don't get to tell me what makes me happy. Each of us have our own idea of what is best for us. That's sacred to you. That's sacred to me. And everybody in the world, it's sacred to them. That's why they want to come and live here. They want to escape oppressive governments. And you might be like, well, I think our government is oppressive. Or our government is getting increasingly oppressive. But there is one thing that is actually restraining our government so that we are still not anywhere near as oppressive as other countries. And I've lived in other countries. In Cameroon, where I grew up, no citizen was allowed to ever own a firearm, ever. You could go to prison if you were ever caught with a firearm. But bandits had fully automatic machine guns. And even the police were afraid of the bandits. And many of my friends were stopped by bandits. My father was stopped by bandits. And some people I knew were killed with machine gun fire, stopped on the side of the road with bandits. So, trust me, there are worse places to live than here. Even though our government is getting increasingly restrictive of our rights, there is actually something that still restrains our government, and it's our Constitution. Now, we can say, well, the government ignores the Constitution. Not completely. If the government ignores our Constitution completely, then how did we just overturn Roe v. Wade? It's because the Roe v. Wade, that was a decision made based on the Constitution. I don't know if you're aware of this, but they tried to stop the wall from being built, and that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the president is the chief executive, and he has the power to redirect Homeland Security funds to build that wall. And that's constitutional, all right? So I want you to know, the Constitution still restrains the government. Now, they're working on putting judges in there who will have a fluid view of the Constitution so that they can change it, but they haven't fully succeeded yet. There are 300 conservative federal judges that are in there now that have been placed in there, and they are restraining the power right now even of our president. And there are Supreme Court justices that are put in there, and they believe in the Constitution, and they are right now, as we speak, restraining the power of the executive and the federal government. That's going on right now, and I thank the Lord for that. And I'm just as frustrated as all of you that there's a lot of areas where they've been able to get people in who aren't loyal to the Constitution, who give a more liberal interpretation so that they can get around it. And I'm just as frustrated as you, and Roe v. Wade is one of those examples that's been going on for 50 years, and that's horrible. But I'm just letting you know, the Founding Fathers, they put restraints in place on our government because they know what governments do when you give them absolute power. And people all over the world, they want life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and they come here. And here's how I know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is self-evident. Okay, I want you to know this is self-evident. They didn't say it's the Bible or it's our Enlightenment thinking. They said these truths are self-evident. Our country is built on self-evident truths. Because you have something to say to me if I come to your house and tell you what to do on your own land and on your own property. You don't just let me do that. Why? Well, it's because you want to determine your own right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And by the way, I'm the same way in my home. Right? We're all that way. We don't want someone restricting our life, our liberty, or the pursuit of our happiness. So the Founding Fathers were right. These are self-evident truths. They're self-evident. I want to talk to you this morning about the transformation of America. And I intentionally hyphenated that word. The transformation of America. You see, what I just read to you, that was the idea at the founding. There was a creator. It's self-evident. We're created equal. That's self-evident. We are endowed by our Creator, not the government, with unalienable rights, rights that you cannot alienate from us, that cannot be taken away. Those rights will always be there. They can't be taken away. The person can physically force you not to have those rights, but you still have those rights. They're just being deprived. They're not being practiced, but they're still there, okay? Those rights are still there. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what the Founding Fathers believed, and that is what the Declaration of Independence says. That's Independence Day, is tomorrow. Okay, that's what we celebrate. Every year when we celebrate Independence Day, it's not just, oh, the flag and barbecues. No, it is about the fact that there are self-evident truths that are so precious, they're so obvious, and a group of people threw off tyranny and said, we're going to start a country based on those truths. That every single human being has value and is equal under the law, and you should leave them alone and they should leave you alone, and we need a government to make sure that no one takes those rights away from you. I didn't read this part, but the very next verse said, the very next line says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The purpose of government is to keep you from taking away my right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The purpose of government is to keep me from taking away your right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's why government's necessary. God says in the Bible, they're the servant of God. They're the minister of God that bears the sword. And he says, as he beareth not the sword in vain. Okay? You have to have lethal force to threaten you not to take away my rights, and lethal force to threaten me not to take away your rights in order to preserve the rights. Otherwise, to secure these rights, otherwise you can't secure the rights. If we wrote the Declaration of Independence, if they had written the Declaration of Independence and not instituted a government, you today would have none of those rights and I wouldn't have them. None of our rights would be secure because you could take mine away anytime you wanted. I could take away yours anytime you wanted. So you have to have government to secure these rights. Governments are instituted among men. Now, it just so happens the Bible teaches the same thing. But according to the Declaration of Independence, there's no religious person that's imposing their will on a non-religious person about these rights, because these rights are actually self-evident. They are as self-evident truths. So that's how we started. We've had a few speed bumps along the way, haven't we? We had a few problems along the way, but that's how we started. I want to bring it into today. There has come a transformation, and I intentionally hyphenated that word. There has come into our country a transformation. We're going to talk about the transformation of America. The word trans in Latin means to change or to move from one thing to another. Trans, like transit, transportation. All right, that's the word trans. And the word formation is to form something, or a form, or like a formation, right? So it's to form something, to shape something. So the word transformation means to change the form. There are forces in our country today that have been and still are and intend in the future to transform this idea that these truths are self-evident. People who do not respect that idea and want to transform it, want to change it. We cannot tell them how to live their lives. But we as Christians can understand what is going on. We can be involved as citizens to do everything in our power to keep those transformations from happening. But I want you to understand something, and this is where it's going to get a little personal. Toward the end of the message, I'm going to talk about how there's a transformation that has occurred among Christians too. That does not go along with these rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and along with the Bible. And we need to acknowledge that as well, because the Bible says, if my people, which are called by my name, so who's it talking to? Not unsaved people. It's talking to Christians. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways. You see, one of the reasons why, as Christians, we've not been very good at changing the culture is because we have actually changed along with the culture, and so we don't really have a testimony anymore. So if we really want to be a force for good in our country, we have to deal with our own transformation first. It's so easy. I could get a really great rousing amens, a great sermon out of just preaching about the people who aren't saved and who don't believe the Bible and who are transforming America. We could talk about that. But you know what? In this passage in Mark chapter 10, Jesus Christ dealt with a transformation that wasn't just about the basic self-evident truths, but also about the fact that God's people change his word, and there are sins that they no longer call sins. And we have to call sin sin in our own lives before we can transform America. And that's why he said, if my people shall turn from their wicked ways. You've heard me say this many times before, but I think most of the time when we hear 2 Chronicles 7:14, we think it's unsaved people that need to turn from their wicked ways. That isn't true. That isn't what the Bible says. The Bible teaches that God's people need to turn from their wicked ways. God's people. Now, we need to know what the wicked ways are of the unsaved people, so we don't allow those ways to change us. Yes, but not to condemn them. They have a different belief than us. They're not saved. It's not our job to straighten out unsaved people. It is our job to look at our own lives, to correct the things that are wrong there, and then to go to be active politically, because that's even taught in the Bible, and then also to share the gospel. Once a person is saved and they agree with us that the Bible is their authority, then they can take the time to gradually, like we are gradually learning how to obey the Bible, they'll gradually learn how to obey the Bible as well. So, the transformation of America. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take that sentence out of the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to break it down into, just to explain what exactly does that mean practically. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How does that look practically? That sounds like a great poetic phrase, right? It sounds like a philosophical, a statement of a manifesto of your beliefs. That's great. What does that mean practically? Well, so here's just a few statements I'm going to make. Here's what it means practically. If we are created, okay, that's what it says. We're endowed by our Creator. If we are created, if that's a self-evident truth, okay, statement number one, we should live according to our design. Right? So however God created you, you need to live according to that design. So everything is designed, right? So we're using a building as a protection from the elements because that is what the building is for, right? You drive your car because that's what the car is for. You know, you might put plants in a school bus, but that's because you decided to use it for something different, right? But you're not going to buy a brand new school bus and then just plant plants in it. You're going to use the school bus to transport people, right? Because that's what a bus is for. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. So however we're created, we should live according to our design. I mean, that's self-evident, isn't it? So we're taking this idea that we have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We're endowed by our Creator, and we're making them practical for our everyday life. So if we're created, we should live according to our design. That doesn't necessarily mean that I should tell you that you're not living according to your design. It means, though, that we should all say, okay, if I'm created, what is my design? How can I live according to my design? Okay. If we have rights, right, so that's the creator part. If we're created, we should live according to our design. That's kind of self-evident. If we have rights, no one should take away those rights. That's another stuff, right? If we have rights that we got from God, then no one should take them away. These are obvious, but we're just making a practical application for our life today. Okay, now, if we have a right to life, just going logically step by step, no one has a right to murder us. You heard it from me here. If you have a right to life, no one should murder you. And that's where abortion comes in. Once you are a human being growing in the womb of your mother, no one has a right to murder you. You have exactly the same rights as a fully fledged adult. You have exactly the same rights. No one has a right to take away that life. How you were conceived is irrelevant to the discussion. How do I know that? Okay, simple. Everyone, this wouldn't probably work here, but in a large crowd, everyone here who's conceived by rape, stand up and we're going to execute you now. You're not really a person, you were conceived by rape. Oh, funny how no one who says, I'm for abortion except in the cases of rape, are willing to shoot an adult who was conceived by rape. Oh, so you're not okay with ending the life of someone who is conceived by rape. Actually, you're saying that that baby is not a person. That's what you're saying. So don't bring up rape. Just say it's not a person so you can kill it anytime you want. Why bring up rape? Because you won't shoot an adult who was conceived by rape. So don't bring up rape. That has nothing to do with it. Or it has everything to do with it. Oh, it does? Then why won't you shoot an adult who is conceived by rape? It has nothing to do with it. And you know, everyone knows, it's self-evident. Everyone knows it's nothing to do with it. It's whether or not it's a person. Okay. If we have a right to life, no one has the right to murder us. All right, now let's bring up liberty. These are just practical applications for our life today. If we have a right to liberty, no one has a right to control us. If you have a right to liberty, I don't have a right to tell you how to live your life. If I have a right to liberty, you don't have a right to tell me how to live my life. No one has a right to control us if we have a right to liberty. Now remember what we said, the only role of government there is, well, government's controlling me. No, only if they're stopping you from taking away someone else's rights, okay? Then they're not controlling you. They're making sure the other person, that you can't control them. Does that make sense? So you still have to have government, because you have to have someone who can use the threat of lethal force to prevent you from taking away someone else's rights, okay? So no one has a right to control us, and that includes the fact that the government will actually stop you from controlling someone else or someone else from controlling you. So that's why you still have to have government. But that's actually not controlling you. That's stopping you from controlling someone else. That's how it works. That's what the Founding Fathers understood, the importance of government. That's liberty. We have a right to liberty, no one has a right to control us. Okay. If we have a right to pursue our happiness, every human being wants to make their life better. They want to be able to eat and drink and live their lives, have a place to live. They want to enjoy life. Every human being. That's just a natural thing. Every human being, you want to take care of your bodily needs. You want to enjoy life. You want to eat and drink and breathe air and own some property and improve your situation in life. Every human being has that desire. If we have a right so that's the pursuit of happiness. If we have a right to pursue our happiness, this is important. No one has a right to decide for us what will make us happy. So I can say, well, Al, that's your name now, right?
Yeah.
We talked about all your brothers and sisters, so I want to make sure I got the right name right. Okay, we pray for all of you, just let you know. Yeah. There's somebody in this church that cares about you and brings you up for prayer. So yeah, so Al, I could say, oh, I believe in your right to pursue your happiness, but you're an engineer?
I work for engineers, but I'm
You-
not an engineer.
You work in engineering field.
Yes.
Okay. For whatever reason, at this stage of your life, this is where you ended up, and I assume you consider that to be your best option. That's why you're doing it. So it would basically be part of the pursuit of your happiness.
Yes.
So I could come along and say, Al, I have only your best interests in mind. I believe with all my heart that you have the right to pursue your happiness. And I know that you would be happiest if you were a fireman. So I am going to force you to become a fireman because you don't know what will make you happy, Al. I believe that I know what will make you happy, and I want you to be a fireman. And so you're pursuing your happiness, Al, right? I could say that, but that's not true. Why? Now here's the thing. I could be right. It is very possible that Al would actually be happier as a fireman. I'm just theoretically, I could be right. Maybe something else. But theoretically, I could be right and you could be wrong. In other words, you could think what you're doing now will make you happy, but there could be some other occupation out there that would actually make you happier that you don't even know about, that you don't even know you're good at, and I could force you to do it, and then someday you would thank me and be like, thank you for taking away all my freedom and forcing me to do something. I'm so much happier now. In theory, that is possible. In theory. Not really likely, but in theory. And there's an entire political party that believes that they know better than you will make you happy. That's why they don't mind taking away all your rights, because it's all for your own good. It's all for your own good. Okay. However, that's not the definition of the pursuit of happiness, is it? The definition of pursuit of happiness is I don't tell Al what will make him happy, and Al doesn't tell me what will make me happy. No, the pursuit of happiness is you do whatever you think will make you happy. I do whatever I think. So that's a sacred thing. I don't have a right to take that away from you. You don't have a right to take that away from me. No one has a right to take that away from anyone else. If we have a right to pursue our happiness, no one has a right to decide for us what will make us happy. Now I know what all the teenagers in this room are thinking right now. Exactly. Amen. Freak you. My parents have no idea what will make me happy. I do. So if my parents just back off and get rid of all of their rules, I can choose for myself what makes me happy. No one has a right to control me. All right. Right, all right. So there is a self-evident truth about that as well. And that is, I'll walk you through it. The right to life begins when we are conceived, correct? Because you can live outside the womb when you're like 21 weeks old now, okay? 20, some people can't live outside the womb when they're 21 years old. I was kidding. That was just a joke. Okay. You can live outside the womb when you're 21 weeks old. There are quite a few. You know who the Duggar family is? We camped near them. We visited with them. They have a little girl named Josie. Okay, some of you know if you follow them. And that little girl, shortly before we met them, she was born premature. She was born at 25 weeks. Now you know that full term is what? 40 weeks. 25 weeks. That's almost halfway. That's only a little over halfway. That girl is alive today. Josie Duggar. She's alive today. But a huge number of people in America say that when she was 25 weeks old, she was not a person. She's alive today. Did she have a right to life? She had a right to life. So the right to life begins when? When we're conceived. So here's an important question. When does the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness begin? Does that begin when we're conceived too? No. I'll explain. These are self-evident truths. You'll agree with me when you hear it. The right to life begins when we're conceived. That's clear. The right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness, now listen, hear me out. Don't tune me out, teenagers. Hear me out. The right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness begins when we are adults. Now let me explain why. Because we do not have the ability to make informed decisions and provide for our own needs until we are adults. Now you notice I said adults, I didn't say an age. I'll tell you why. There are 16-year-olds that could actually make informed decisions. In other words, the decisions they make is based on, they know the facts about both sides. So if I decide this, this will happen. If I decide that. There are plenty of 16-year-olds who are mature and would be able to make an informed decision, okay? And there are plenty of 16-year-olds who would be able to provide for their own needs. So that's the second part. We do not have the ability to make informed. So the right to liberty is the freedom to make decisions, correct? And the pursuit of happiness is the ability to pursue it. So we have the resources and the means and the ability to make decisions and to pursue our happiness. So both involves like providing for our own needs and making informed decisions. Okay? So even though there are many 16-year-olds who could do that, they could like just move out of their parents' home and they could get a job and they could have a car and they could make their own decision. There are many. But there are actually many 18, 19, 20-year-olds who actually would struggle with that. They could actually, something physically bad could happen to them because they could starve to death or something because they didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't really know how to make good decisions. So what the government has done is arbitrarily picked an age. This is a fact. This is how it works. That's kind of an average age. It really is. It's kind of an average. When you, in general, that average age, 18, is kind of an average. So people can do it younger, people can do it older. They just pick on an average, okay? An average age when you have the ability to make informed decisions and you can provide for your own needs. You understand? It's those two things. That's really what an adult is. An adult is someone who has the ability to make informed decisions. So they know both sides, they can weigh and go, okay, I looked at it, I could do this, I could do this, I could do that, I think I'm going to do this, okay? Now here's the thing. If you go too young to make adulthood, that's actually child abuse. It is. Because if you push, say, a 14-year-old who doesn't really have the ability to make informed decisions, I'm talking about knowing enough about life and cause and effect to be able to make an informed decision. They can make a bad one, it just needs to be an informed decision, okay? Or if they can't provide for their needs. And you just go, okay, you're 14 years old, bye. Go rent an apartment. You can't drive because the government is evil and doesn't let you drive when you're 14, but you can walk to work. So you work at McDonald's, and then here's a little Skid Row motel and you can rent. Okay, 14 years old, bye. Even though, yeah, there might even be some 14-year-olds who can't. There might be 14-year-olds in this room that think they can handle it. Okay, there is a problem with that, with going younger. I'll tell you why. Because if they don't have that ability and you just throw them out into the dangerous world, it's basically child abuse, isn't it? It's child abuse. So what the government's trying to do, what society's trying to do, every country has a little bit different time. They say the age you can do this or that. But what they're trying to do is give people freedom at the earliest possible age without it being child abuse. Does that make sense? Because too young, it is child abuse. I mean, it's like it's cruel to dump someone into the world and give them that kind of freedom, and they might be making life-altering decisions that are irreversible and they can't go back, and they're not ready. So we all agree that you have a right to choose your own. I have a right to choose, but there is an age you have to pick as when we decide we let them do it. And whether you agree or disagree, in our society in general, we picked 18. All right? But when I say the word adult, I'm referring to someone who is able to make informed decisions and provide for their own needs, which in general is around the age of 18, that the average young person can do that. I'm not saying they always will. I'm saying they have that ability. Okay. Does that make sense? Is it logical? Okay. I'm saying all this because we're leading into a point that we have to get that clear in our minds before we establish the point. Now let's read Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 12. Mark chapter 10, verse 2. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife?" Tempting him. "Pastor, what in the world does that have to do with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?" We'll get there. And he answered and said unto them, "What did Moses command you?" And they said, "Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away." And Jesus answered and said unto them, "For the hardness of your heart he wrote you this precept." Now that's basically simple. Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, he knew that he couldn't force all of the people who were married in Israel to stay together. There's no way, because they are going to have some. Did any of them have some hardness of heart in the wilderness? Were there a few problems? Were God's people doing wrong things? Yes. So Moses knew there was hardness of heart. He knew there were going to be marriages that didn't work out, and there was going to be split ups. So he said, give her a bill of divorcement, and then she's free to go and marry someone else. And then she's not allowed to come back, because that would be like wife swapping, where you go back and forth, and that would create a lot of problems and confusions in society. So give her a bill of divorcement. Now that's because that's not God's intention. Divorce is never God's intention, but because it was laws regulating a society where there are people who have hard hearts. Okay, so he says that to him. Moses suffered to write, "For the hardness of your heart he wrote you this precept." Okay, but from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Now do you see what Jesus is saying? He's saying, you're looking at Moses giving you permission to get divorced as God's okay with it. Jesus is like, no, actually, he had to give that permission because it is a country full of people and they're not all going to stay together. And so there has to be a way to regulate it by law. So give her a bill of divorcement. That's what Jesus told the Pharisees. But then he says this, now listen, for from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. So Jesus is saying, how you determine design is creation. Genesis, not Deuteronomy. You understand? Jesus is saying to them, Deuteronomy is God's law for governing a nation, but if you want to know self-evident truth, you go back to Genesis. That's what Jesus is telling the disciples, the Pharisees. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. And for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother. Now he's quoting from Genesis 2. And cleave to his wife. And they twain, two, shall be one flesh. So then they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Okay, so Jesus is saying to the Pharisees, God said, when a man and a woman are one flesh, which means they become physically one. What God has joined together, let man not put asunder. They're not two anymore, they're one. God so designed men and women that when they come together in physical unity, there is a certain hormones that are involved with that. There's a certain connection that happens through that, and it's damaged if that is destroyed by multiple partners or if that is destroyed by tearing them apart. It is design. Even science confirms that design. And so he said, God joined them together at that point because that was his intention, that they would come together as one flesh. So therefore, once you come together with someone as one flesh, God has joined you together. He says, let not man put asunder. Now he's talking about self-evident truth. He's talking about God's design, a creator. Verse 10, and in the house, his disciples asked him again of the same matter. The disciples are like, I don't know, Jesus, that sounds awfully strict. You're saying that once you get together with someone, you're supposed to stay together with them like till death do us part? Whew, Jesus, you're so narrow and strict. We know that they said that because of other passages where they say, well, it's better not to even get married then. That was their reaction. So the disciples were saying, from other passages, they're like, I'm stuck with that person for life? Jesus was like, yep. They're like, maybe it's better not to get married. Jesus is like, yeah, it is better not to get married. Did you know Jesus actually said that? He says, oh, there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God. He's saying that you decided I'm not going to get married. That's better. But then he modified it. He said, everyone cannot receive this, but those to whom it has been given. Basically, singleness is a gift. Not everybody can handle that. Even though Jesus said, actually, yeah, you're probably better off not getting married. He said most people are going to get married. It's only if you actually have that strong sense and calling from God that God wants me to be single. Okay, otherwise you're probably going to get married. That's how and by the way, the Apostle Paul said the exact same thing in 1 Corinthians 7. Exact same thing. So just in case you wonder, was Jesus really holding up a high standard of no divorce at all, period? Yes, he was. That's why the disciples said it's better not to marry. If Jesus was giving people permission to get divorced, then the disciples would never have said that it's better not to marry. And if they had misunderstood what he meant, he never would have said, oh, wait, you think I'm giving an extreme position that says you can never get divorced. That's not true. He would have clarified if they were misinterpreting him. But instead, he agreed with their conclusion. That's how you know marriage is for life, and it's a very serious commitment. So then it says, in the house his disciples asked him again of the same matter. And he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. Jesus just took it to a whole nother level. And he said, if you put away your wife and you marry another, you're committing adultery against your first wife because you're breaking the vow that you made. And if a woman shall put away her husband, just in case you thought that only applied to the man, he puts the woman in there too. If a woman be put away from her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. Now, I do want to clarify in this passage, there's no teaching in the Bible that remarried people are living in continuous adultery. There's no teaching of that in the Bible. In the Bible, very often, the word adultery refers to the breaking of a covenant. Very often, it even has a symbolic meaning. So it's not referring to the fact that if divorced or married people are living together, they're living in continuous adultery. That is not the teaching. The reason I know that is if it was, then there would be commands in the New Testament that when divorced or married people got saved, that they should split up. And there's not a single command for that anywhere in the New Testament. So I'm just letting you know that. He teaches that remarriage is adultery, but he does not teach that remarried people are living in continuous adultery. It's the act of getting married that is breaking your covenant with the other person, which the Bible calls adultery. Yes?
And if the spouse passes
Yes.
and
Yes, if your spouse
the widow
dies.
or the widower
Yeah.
finds another mate.
Yes. Because the marriage is broken by death.
Okay.
Till death do us part.
Yes.
The Bible says that if her husband be dead, she is not, if she be married to another man, she is no longer an adulteress because her husband's dead. The Bible teaches that, yes.
Okay.
That's a good thing to get to clarify. Okay, so Jesus is laying down God's design, okay, and it relates to gender and marriage and divorce and remarriage, okay? That's kind of different from what we're doing in America today, isn't it? Very, very different. Especially parents. I want you to pay attention to this message. Pay attention to this message because there is an agenda out there to change your children's mind on this. You may think my mind's been made up on this issue. I know about men, male and female and God's design. Hey, there is a whole group of people out there. They even have a song about it. They wrote a song, "We're coming for your children." I don't know if you want to Google it and watch and listen to that song or not. It'll scare your socks off. But it's a gay men's choir in San Francisco that wrote a song saying, "You're afraid, and you should be, because we're coming for your children." What they meant was not they were coming to abuse your children. They meant they're coming to indoctrinate your children. And the song's called "We're Coming for Your Children." There's an agenda out there to change, to transform our thinking on God creating us and that we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first transformation, okay, we're talking about the transformation of America. The first transformation is the transformation of gender, okay? And what did Jesus say? From the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Now listen to me. If you are born and you are physically male or physically female, God created you that way. That's a self-evident truth. It's not based on the Bible. It's a self-evident truth. Because it's a self-evident truth that there's a creator, and so therefore we are designed. And so if we are designed, you are born, God made you male or female. So, Jesus said, God made them male and female. Jesus believed in two genders, male and female. Now, I'm not here to rail on or preach against unsafe people who say, I have a different belief. I'm here to teach God's people about God's design. Just clarifying, okay? But we need to know about this because there is an agenda out there to change what Christians believe about this topic. And there's especially agenda out there to change your children. And that is a violation of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why? Because what I just said. You do not have, if you're not an adult, you can't make those decisions. Because you're not an adult yet, so you can't make an informed decision and you can't provide for your own needs. So that's a sacred thing, to bring our children to adulthood. Once they're adults, they can pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and even though it might go in a direction that you don't personally agree with, that's a right given them from God to determine their own destiny. That is sacred. But before they are of the age where they can make informed decisions and provide for their own needs, you are their guardians, and it is your responsibility to protect them from anything, from making a decision that is irreversible, that they can never go back and change when they're old enough to make informed decisions. Because if you take away that from them before they are old enough, you took away their right to life, liberty, or to not to life, but to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. That's what you just did. You took that right away from them because they weren't old enough to make that informed decision. They weren't old enough for that. Now, I did quite a bit of study on this topic. It's one of the reasons why I was late to church today. I wasn't late. I was 5 minutes early. I normally try to be here about half an hour early. It's one of the reasons I was only 5 minutes early to church today. I was doing this research this morning because I forgot to do it yesterday. There's a study. It's called the Cedars-Sinai Study. The name of the hospital in Southern California that does most of the gender transition treatment and surgery is Mount Sinai Hospital. How ironic is that? Whew. What did God say on Mount Sinai? Shalt not commit adultery. I am the Lord thy God. Maybe they should change their name before there's thunder and lightning on Mount Sinai. But anyway, it's called Mount Sinai Hospital. And God also said, all the things that he said on Mount Sinai. Okay, so anyway, this is a study that they did, and it was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. They studied about 200 transgender people. In that study, they found that more than 70% of transgender people first, this is their wording, first experienced gender dysphoria by the age of 7. So they studied like 200 transgender people. And they asked them and talked with them about when they started thinking that they were in the wrong body. And they said that average age was 7. They started thinking that. Now listen, the article I got this from, they're trying to prove that this is why you need to talk to children about gender transition. They think this is scientific proof. I would argue it's still telling you the opposite. It's saying they're making life irreversible decisions at the age of 7, and you're depriving them of liberty in the pursuit of happiness. Because you're limiting the choices they can make when they're adults. They could make all those choices when they're adults. They've been making those choices as adults for 40, 50 years now. But you're depriving them of that if you do it when they're that age. Okay, so it says by the age of 7. Now, that's the Cedars-Sinai study. Now, I went and looked up the Human Rights Campaign. That's an LGBT rights group, okay? And on their website, they have you don't have to do this research, I did it for you. You probably don't want to read this stuff, okay? But they have a paper called Supporting and Caring for Transgender Children. That's the name of the paper, okay? I wanted to know accurately, what are they actually teaching? Because listen, what they are actually teaching is in the culture, and it's being adopted by leaders in the culture. And listen, it's being spread in public schools, on social media, and in all kinds of ways that you aren't even aware of that is being taught to your children. So you have a responsibility as a parent to know what is out there. The Human Rights Campaign, in their paper called Supporting and Caring for Transgender Children, they describe the steps of gender transition this way. First, it's social transition, where you begin dressing and acting like the opposite way, and you usually take a different name, and you ask everybody to call you that, and then that's where you want to use a different restroom and all those things. Okay, that's called social transition. That is what they're encouraging people to do with a 7-year-old, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old. There was a reality TV show called I Am Jazz about it that tracked a boy who thought they were a girl, and their transition all the way through. Okay. So here are the steps of gender transition. Social transition, then puberty blockers. You might be like, well, why do they need that? Well, I'll explain to you why. It's because if you are a man, if you are male, but you think you're female, what happens when you're 13, 14 years old? You're a male, you think you're female. Now all your friends and everyone in your class, their body looks different than yours, right? Because you say, I'm female. And the 14-year-old actual female looks at you and goes, at 14, they go, you don't really look like a female. And that causes anxiety. Because I call myself a female, but the other person who's my age, who is a real female, they look at me and I don't match them. I don't look like them. Okay. So that's why they have puberty blockers. Because they want to stop them from entering puberty and to become functionally a male or a female. That's why they do it. Then they have hormone therapy, which means taking testosterone, means taking hormones for whatever you want to be. Because you don't want to look different, act different, and feel out of place from the group that you say you are. If you're male and you say you're female, you want to look like a female, act like a female, talk like a female. If you're a female and you want to be a male, you want to look like a male, talk like a male, act like a male. Because you're in high school. You understand? This is where the thinking leads. This is what's being done. This is the Human Rights Campaign. This is what they're teaching. This is what is being practiced. So they take puberty blockers, but then they take hormone therapy, like I said, and then they do top surgery for adolescents. Why would they do top surgery? Well, obviously, if you are a female, you don't look like a male on the top, do you? If you are a female and you want to be male, you don't look like a male. And if you are a male, you in high school, you don't look like a female on the top, right? And so they do what's called top surgery, okay? And then the last step is bottom surgery for adults. So the lower half of your body has to change. But they do wait, I don't know if I should say to their credit, but they do wait till they're 18 to do the top surgery. Most of the time. The bottom surgery. Most of the time. Not always. Jazz did it when she was 16. That was very rare. There are very few that do it that way. They usually wait until that age. Now, do you understand that they are following a course they believe they have to follow? Because they believe that these children are going to commit suicide if they don't look like what they think they are. So they're very sincere, folks. They really think they're doing the right thing and that people who disagree with them are in the wrong. I understand that. But this is the transformation of America, because how can you have the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness is you're making changes that you can't go back and change. Now, one point I want to make here. When I was 11 years old, I told everyone I was going to be single the rest of my life. I was going to be sassy, single, and satisfied. I didn't say it that way. But when I was 11 years old, I was like, I'm going to be an evangelist, and marriage is complicated and raising children is complicated. So I'm going to be a single evangelist. I can travel the whole world preaching the gospel, and I won't have I can do anything and live anywhere and endure persecution, and it won't matter because I'm single. I guess I didn't think my mom would probably be upset if I was persecuted. I didn't think of that at that point. But I was like, I'm going to be single. I'm going to be a single evangelist my whole life. I was very on fire for the Lord. I was 11 years old. I was going to change the world with the gospel. I was so excited. And I told everybody that. And people would always tease me about, Mark's going to be single his whole life. I was 11. When you're 7, you might say that you're actually a girl. When you're 7, you might say you're actually a boy. When you're 11, you might say that you're always going to be single. Oh, but something happened to me between 11 and 13. And suddenly, when I was 13 years old, I said, I think I would like to get married. Do you know why? This is so important. When I was 11, I couldn't make an informed decision. But even when I was 13, I wasn't necessarily making an informed decision, but I was a little better informed. And by the time I was 15, 16, 17, 18, I was sure I wanted to get married. Now, it didn't mean I had to get married. That was my choice. But what if someone had stolen that choice away from me? And so, you're going to be single? Well, you don't need those parts of your body because you're going to be single. Think about it. That's what's going on. These people are very sincere. They really believe they're doing the right thing. But they're taking away, listen, and this is why it relates to July 4th. The right to pursue the liberty and the pursuit of happiness, they're taking it away. Because if I had made, and that would never happen, of course, it's just an analogy, but if some unaltering decision had been made on me when I was 11 years old, when I was an adult, if I could never go back and change it, and sometimes I maybe wouldn't even know what my choice could have been because I would never know how I felt. So what is so important to understand is this. Before we go through puberty, we don't know what it feels like to be an adult. We don't know. We've never experienced it. Therefore, preventing someone from going through puberty deprives them of the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. You're stealing that right away from them. They'll never, ever have it. Because you prevented them from knowing how